Welcome to our amazing panelists. So I'd love to kickstart this panel by a quick introduction of myself. I'm Potter. I'm the co-founder at ETHSign. Joined crypto in 2017. Started blockchain at USC in college, and ETHSign is a Web3. You can think of it as like a Web3 version of DocuSign with like a attestation service upon. And we also built a token management platform called Token Table that basically helps founders to manage cap table and distribute tokens to their different stakeholders, so on and so forth. But today is not for ETHSign. We'd love to kickstart by amazing panelists to kickstart about the brief intro about who you are with your respected organization. We can start with Charles.
Cool, yeah, great to be here. So I know this is an interoperability panel. Espresso does help a lot with interoperability, but we're primarily a sequencing solution. Anyways, my name is Charles. I'm one of the co-founders of Espresso Systems. We are the developers of the Espresso sequencer. And as I mentioned, we're working on a decentralized shared sequencer. And what that means is really pretty much all rollups right now, including the big, public L2 rollups like Optimism, Arbitrum, etc., are basically all run by a centralized sequencer, and this applies to the smaller app-specific rollups as well that are such as the ones launched by AltLayer. These rollups are all basically the transactions that users submit are basically ordered and included based on the decision of one party, whether it's like a single server or a set of servers operated by a single entity like a company. And though many rollups have protections against the sequencer stealing funds, if not all, there are many things that a malicious centralized sequencer could do, such as monopoly pricing or censorship. So decentralizing the sequencer is a real need, and I believe almost all rollups have that on the roadmap. Now, shared sequencing, that's the part that really helps with interoperability. I'm sure we'll cover it during the panel. I don't want to take too much time. But that is the idea that multiple rollups share the same sequencer. And with that, a shared sequencer can make a guarantee of atomic inclusion, which means that if you have a user wanting two transactions to go in, either together or none at all, so either both of them or none at all, but never one of the two, that's something that the sequencer can guarantee. The main problem is that we can't guarantee atomic execution with only with a stateless sequencer. So that's the main limitation. But yeah, excited to talk more with, and we do view ourselves as extremely complementary and synergistic with all of the solutions here.
Cool. Yep, can't wait for some hot takes on shared sequencing. But hey, everybody, my name is Nam. I'm one of the co-founders working on Hyperlane. Hyperlane is an interoperability protocol that especially focuses on, I think, the topic of the date was rollups. We're focusing on rollups because we believe there will be many rollups deployed by AltLayers and many of folks in that category. And one of the things that is necessary for those rollups is interoperability, but especially one that is permissionless, not one where you have to like ask somebody else to please deploy the bridge to them. And that's kind of our main claim to fame. And yeah, like Charles, happy to kind of maybe get more into the weeds after this intro.
Sweet, yeah. Hey folks, I'm Vaibhav, also go by VC, one of the founders here at Socket. And have been building like rollups and sidechains for quite some time. Built Polygon POS, chain, bridge, built one of the rollup systems back in 2019. And yeah, after like building all of these rollup systems came to a very real realization essentially that we're going to have so many of them, and connecting them all back together in an asynchronous fashion, but also trustlessly is super important, and that's what Socket's here for. I think Socket's the biggest modular asset bridge right now, and we are kind of like increasing our capabilities by adding adding capabilities like message transfers that are also trustless in like cross L2 setting. And yeah, pretty excited to get into details with like shared sequencing and some other complementary topics.
Awesome. My name is Matthew Hammond. I oversee marketing at Connext, but have been working on kind of cross-chain problems for a number of years now. For those of you not familiar, Connext is a modular interoperability protocol that focuses primarily on an intent layer to do like fast value transfer for user-facing interactions. And then we leverage the underlying AMBs themselves and create an optimistic bridge.
Alrighty. So let's just dive right into it. I guess the first question would be, interoperability between different chains remains a priority. What would you say is a core reason why cross-chain composability is important to focus on? And what innovations approaches do you believe hold the most promise in enhancing cross-chain like compatibility? Anything is welcome. Any insights?
I'll go quick because I took a lot of time. But to answer the second part of the question, I think shared sequencing can help with practically any interoperability solution or situation where messages need to be validated and passed across chains or rollups. There's a few reasons for that. So the first reason being we're greatly simplifying the need for light clients between multiple chains. Without a shared sequencer, basically to confirm that something has been processed on another chain, you basically need a light client that not only verifies execution, but also consensus or sequencing on the other chain. Whereas if two rollups or two chains were to share the same sequencer, you no longer really need to verify consensus because they're both running on the same sequencer. You really only need to verify execution. So that, imagine a world where there's thousands of rollups. Instead of needing like 1 million or 500,000 pairwise execution-like clients, sequencing-like clients, you really just need them to plug into a single sequencer. So that has significant savings for ongoing operations as well as development costs. And shared sequencing can also lower bridge latency. And there are a small class of security attack surfaces and security issues that shared sequencing prevents. But of course, it isn't a magic bullet. It doesn't solve everything.
Yeah, I think kind of like taking on the first part of the problem on like why do we really need like composability across chains? I think it's a very kind of like easy question to answer. I mean, blockchain has like a limited set of users. And right now, the way we are heading towards, all of these users are like siloed across like multiple layer 2s. And if I'm building on Arbitrum and my friend is building on Optimism, our protocols cannot compose together. We can't share liquidity, we can't share users, we can't build on top of each other. That is not an ideal way to grow the ecosystem. So I think just that is like a big enough need for inter-protocols to exist.
Yeah, related to Hyperlink recently worked with Celestia to build kind of the TIA bridge over to Celestia rollups, what we call Nexus, and we started up originally as an EVM, I guess, only implementation, and only recently really got exposed more to the Cosmos, who obviously had kind of that kind of thought of like native interoperability or these kind of like this internet of blockchains for quite a while. And I think what's been really interesting as I guess a more recent arriver to the Cosmos is that there's been a lot of like very interesting like tooling and abstractions and services that kind of like allow this kind of internet of blockchains to work, and something that we just don't have in the EVM world, right? Like the chain picker on MetaMask is like really annoying once you have more than 10 chains, and right like for bridges like aggregators such as Socket are like really nice to use, but they still require kind of the user to be aware of that. And so honestly, a lot of the innovations that I think I'm looking forward to for people to solve on top of all of our interoperability solutions is like the UX on top. And that's, I think, something that, yeah, we certainly need more folks to kind of be involved with.
Yeah, I agree with Nam. I think like as the bridging space continues to evolve, we're seeing kind of this movement away from these monolithic bridges and into like a more modular stack. And so like at the security layer, I think that there's a number of interesting advancements that we're likely to see, from like ZK Lite clients to obviously like shared sequencing. And then to Nam's point, like I think the big change that we're likely to see in the coming years is really like the intent layer getting a lot stronger, like providing a really smooth experience for the user and abstracting away a lot of the routing. And I would be surprised if we don't see kind of over that duration kind of more prevalence in chain abstractions, such that a user can like lend from any chain to any chain, and all of that's like handled abstracted in the background.
That makes sense. However, while these are all in all developing and also kind of growing in rapid rate for the user perspective, there are also some security vulnerability that you might get when during the bridges or achieve interoperability across chains. How do you guys think are some of the risk factors, and and what do you guys do on the security level to prevent that to happen?
I can take a stab about how shared sequencing plays into this. So one class of attacks for any sort of bridging or any message passing system between two chains, or I say chains, when I say chains, that includes rollups, is basically the issue of finality between two chains. So if you have a very naive wrapping protocol where you're locking funds into a contract, let's say like USDC, into a contract on rollup A, and then rollup B checks that you've locked it, and then mints like a wrapped USDC on rollup B. Then an attacker that is able to compromise the finality of the consensus on rollup A, and that could just be a malicious single centralized sequencer like the rollups today, if they just change the history, then the attacker basically has double the funds. They have the original assets on rollup A that are free, that they can immediately sell, and then they have the wrapped assets on rollup B. Now, you'll notice that shared sequencing kind of removes the risk of this type of attacks, because if two rollups share the same sequencer, then even if an attacker manages to compromise the finality of the sequencer, it'll only be able to revert both chains. So that's like the simple idea here of the class of attacks that shared sequencing solves. But of course, it doesn't solve everything. Just my two cents.
I mean, like since we are on a panel here, and I have an opportunity to ask Charles like a quick question on that, and it might help the public kind of understand things better as well. Like I think today kind of like all messaging protocols, at least like a good amount of them kind of like wait for sequencer to post data to Ethereum, and only then move to the step where they, let's say, mint the asset on the second chain. So I mean, it's not an attack vector that exists today, but it definitely means that these messaging protocols are like waiting like over long periods of time. So I think maybe like the real kind of solution there is about making cross-chain faster, right?
Yeah, I think it's a more general point, right? So if it takes transaction data to be posted to Ethereum as for something to be considered final, then that would be a higher bar to cross to compromise finality. But yeah, you're completely right that like one of the benefits of shared sequencing is to lower the bridge latency, especially if you can have a sequencing protocol that guarantees fast finality, meaning that users can trust that a transaction is final very quickly, which is really what Espresso is focusing on. It's one of the two things that we focus on. One being as credibly neutral as possible, in part by being able to scale to as many nodes as we can. Coupled with restaking, we're trying to target the same validator set, the same physical node set as Ethereum, and the second being extremely fast finality, almost as fast as you would expect from a centralized sequencer. But yeah, great point.
Maybe to add to that, I think this is obviously like a shared sequencer is a specific point in its trade-off spectrum, which I think has some obviously nice benefits, but comes I think with some downsides that I don't think we need to get into now. But obviously no solution is perfect. But I think maybe the point that obviously like we as Hyperlane want to point out is that the optimal, I guess, solution for like the security of a message will always depend on the two chains, right? Like yes, if two chains have a shared sequencer, probably very likely that path is going to be like, we will likely want to use that given like, yeah, latency, let's say cost considerations. But like I mentioned, I think like, right, like it's the same as like, oh, if all websites ran on AWS, then you have like great interoperability between those websites on AWS. But I think the reality is going to be, right, that there's going to be many different roll-up stacks, many different chains, many different execution environments, which are maybe not going to be able to use a shared sequencer. And so I think to me, it seems inevitable that interoperability will move into a world where, yeah, like developers need to be able, not just developers, but like communities need to be able to kind of like pick the best trust assumptions available to them, and that most likely does not look like a single solution, such as a shared sequencer or such as like a middle chain of validators. And so we hope that, yeah, more interoperability protocols, everybody here on stage included, is kind of moving to a more modular architecture that does allow for those kind of expressions and doesn't like kind of like pigeonhole people into like, yeah, this kind of like, I guess, narrative that a single point in this trade-off spectrum can always win.
Yeah, I think that's actually pretty good point. I think not all applications require like the same level of security. People are kind of building all sorts of applications on top of these protocols that we all are building. If someone's building, let's say, a cross-chain swap, they definitely wanna optimize for like limited latency across chains, and they might want to, let's say, reduce the amount of like multi-sig signers on the middle chain, or kind of, let's say, rely on the native bridge and stuff like that. So I think kind of like allowing people to choose the trade-off while making the system such that external parties that are not part of the protocol can easily monitor. The protocol is like one thing Socket's trying to do really well. If you can literally run a watcher node on your mobile phone and be sure that the bridge is not bust. And if the bridge indeed has some like issues going on, then your, let's say, lighter node can kind of like notify the ecosystem real quick that something might be happening and kind of signal for a temporarily pause of the bridge, right? So I think like making the system such that it can be monitored by external parties easily for faults or for liveliness problems is like also very important in this space.
Yeah, I think that we've heard a lot of great answers to it. I mean, there's obviously a lot that can go wrong with bridges. I think at Connext in particular, we think that one of the foremost risks is bridges that introduce like external validator sets. And so we always kind of strive towards inheriting like that same layer of security as the underlying layer one and leveraging the native AMBs themselves.
A lot of great answers, actually. So besides, talking about the risks and maybe let's switch gears a little bit. What do you guys think about modular blockchain, and what are the most excited components you guys are excited about making it or changing it modular?
Yeah, I can see now I'm getting excited.
Love. I mean, we all. I'm pretty sure we all said modular on this panel, so can't claim this for myself. But yeah, I think we love modular blockchains. I think it was very fun earlier to see like the panel about like the DA layers with all the different DA layers on stage. And I think what's most fun is that just like 2 or 3 years ago we kind of started talking about this, and I guess like everything in crypto or technology in general, everything takes a little longer than you want it to. But the fact that, I guess Celestia just launched, EigenDA just announced testnet, like we are actually seeing this kind of like modular blockchain thesis play out. And, similar to how in Web 2, right, like when you made infrastructure more accessible, when you made it easier for people to build more expressive applications with like less time, like cloud computing, right? It allowed the creation of applications or products that just weren't possible before. And so I was just mentioning this outside, but like things like fully on-chain games, right? Like the fact that like block space can be created without the need to like raise a bunch of VC money and then like kind of like find a validator set is like so interesting, because now, two dudes in a garage can just like build a completely new product that just wasn't possible before. And that's what, totally gets me going. I have no idea what people will build, but I sure hope they need interoperability.
Yeah, I think adding a little bit to that, like as we see innovations kind of on the security layer, we're likely to see like both latency and cost come down over time. And I think from a user-facing perspective, like we're likely to see kind of like drastic improvements on the intent layer where we're able to fulfill this much more quickly and kind of like pass off that risk and more importantly probably the latency to like the solver.
Yeah, I think like the modular paradigm kind of like allows like protocols to finally kind of like operate or kind of specialize on their edge, right? So someone's building a protocol whose edge is to be, being as fast as possible, right? Going modular kind of allows these protocols to assemble all of these components such that they are able to maximize their edge of like being fast and kind of like really give, let's say it's a trading application, really kind of allow traders to feel like they're trading on Binance, right? So I think the modular future allows protocols to like really specialize on what are like the 2-3 important things that their protocol needs to optimize for. And I think one thing that gets missed is interop is everywhere in this modular future. So I think what's happening right now with rollups is everyone is launching a rollup, and there is a high need for all of these rollups to be kind of like composed back together, but in a different fashion than if they were on the same chain together, right? So as we kind of head into this like rollup-centric future, the need for interop has increased, and now we see like unbundling happen with the DA and settlement and execution. That again kind of increases the need for interop, because DA needs to communicate to settlement, and execution needs to communicate to DA and settlement both. So what I really mean is, when you unbundle things, there is an inherent increase in the need for bundling them back together, but in a different way than how it was before.
Yeah, I definitely agree with all those responses, and I obviously I'm biased, but I definitely think modular is the future. Just to give a simple intuition of why I so strongly believe that. If you think about what a blockchain or a layer 1 blockchain is, it's really just a state machine replication system. Basically, nodes in the network basically need to agree on the ordering of transactions. They need to execute those transactions, and then they need to agree on the resulting state. So there's 3 parts to that. The first being consensus, so just determining the ordering of the transactions. Number 2 being the data broadcast, so making sure that the data is available to every node in the network, or else there's no way they can execute. And then the 3rd being the execution, which means actually processing the transactions and agreeing on the result. And if you think about it, rollups are really just the first step towards modularizing those 3 components. The core idea behind rollups is to move the execution off the chain. And we as Espresso, a sequencer, we're kind of modularizing the first part, which is the consensus or the ordering. And then of course you have many data availability solutions as well. And in the layer 1 setting, where every node in the network needs to perform all 3 roles, consensus, data transmission, as well as execution, you're really bottlenecked by the slowest part. Whereas in the modular setting, as Vaibhav said, you can really focus on your strength, and there's no need to have the weakest of 3 things being the bottleneck. So for instance, in our setting, as the sequencer, none of our sequencer nodes execute, and our sequencer nodes actually don't even need, we have a relaxed data availability requirement as well, because the sequencer nodes don't really need to have all the data. We just need to make sure that the data is available to the rollup, which performs the execution. So yeah, just some simple intuition on why modular is so effective and why it's going to be the future of scaling, in my opinion.
Already great answers. So if you look forward, fast forward 1 year, what do you think would be would have been the biggest development in the space that you foresee to happen, and what would be the respected roadmap for each of your organization, and what are you guys excited about on product and the market as well?
I think one of the things we're likely to see, and we're kind of already seeing, is this push towards better cross-chain token standards. I think we see that with XERC20 and with OFTs and others. But this idea of kind of removing fragmentation of liquidity and this really convoluted user experience across chains. And I think kind of similar to what we've touched on, the other thing that I would be very surprised if we don't see is a lot more chain abstraction, just creating a simpler and faster user experience.
I think for the sake of our credibility here on stage, I guess we sure hope to see a lot more rollups. I think that's really what we need to see. I think at Rollup Day, there's a lot of talk this week about rollups. And again, similar 2 years ago, when we maybe started talking about DA. I think we're definitely in the early stages of it. But a year from now, I would be pretty sad if we don't have a lot more rollups than we have today.
Yeah, I think taking a quick stab at this, although I personally feel that right now we are in that situation where it's unclear how much bundling and unbundling will happen over the next year. I mean, it's really hard to predict on how will the infrastructure stack look like a year or two from now. But I think definite trends are we'll see more rollups and more chain agnostic experience for the end user. I mean, hopefully all of us are able to build these systems and kind of deliver on this promise. But I think everyone on this panel is really, really working hard towards it.
Yeah, definitely agreed. I think if you told me that there'd be thousands or even I'm hearing millions this week of rollups, even half a year ago, I'd be pretty skeptical. I would have always thought there would be 5, but with the launch of all these stacks, Arbitrum Orbit stack, and with all the really great work on the rollup as a service side, for instance by Altair that's coming up, I think it's really huge, and it's unlocking the demand that's already been there. So and I totally agree that good interoperability is a huge part of that.
Lastly, is there any message or there's any plans that you want to tell the crowd that something that's about new updates or anything that you want to share with the crowd? Would love to share in the last question, because we're wrapping up this panel soon.
Chill time.
Oh, go ahead.
Now I think on our end, Socket is kind of working towards a revision of the protocol, such that we almost feel like all infrastructure, or at least all Inter projects right now, are building pipes and TCP/IP protocols, and users are kind of forced to kind of interact with these kind of low-level protocols directly. There is a thick layer of abstraction that needs to be built, and developers and users will ultimately build on this abstraction layer and won't interact with the pipes directly. I think a lot of components like account abstraction, intents, and sequencing, all of these layers will be packaged well together, and we'll be releasing a massive upgrade to the protocol soon.
I think from the Connect side, as far as wrapping up the year, probably the big thing, if you're users of Connect, that you're likely to see is that we're finalizing our network upgrade right now, which will kind of dramatically reduce the overhead associated with adding new chains. And so as we close out the year, we anticipate adding a multitude of additional chains. And so, yeah, on the Connect side, that's probably the big one to look forward to.
Very cool. Yeah, just for Espresso, we don't have anything in the near future, but we just, I believe last month, we released our 3rd testnet, Cortado. That, I believe, was the first shared sequencing network to support 2 rollup stacks. So we supported Polygon stack and OP stack. We did have it was possible to submit 2 transactions on both. But as I mentioned, shared sequencing doesn't get all the way for interoperability. We do need, we just support interoperability solutions. So for our next testnet, Gibraltar, which will be launched in January, we're working with a number of interoperability providers to kind of plug that into shared sequencing, and it's very easy. And hopefully we'll be working with some of the others on stage as well.
Yeah, very excited. We recently announced our v3, which kind of further modularizes the protocol, but especially excited about what I think is really the unique part about our industry, which is permissionlessness, right? The idea that anybody can deploy a rollup, anybody can deploy a smart contract. And so for us, we've been focusing very hard on making it super easy to deploy Hyperlane to your own chain, to your own rollup, without ever having to talk to us at all. And so right now, the experience is you go to our docs, you click 2 buttons, you have interoperability, and I think that's something that we continue to want to focus on, so that, again, I'm a lovely guy, you can talk to me, but I don't want you to have to talk to me, so that's the goal.
Alrighty, let's give a round of applause for our dear panelists, and thank you all for your attention. Thank you.